If you're thinking of writing your first book, whether that's a memoir or a business book or a leadership book or even fiction, I bet you know that you need help. No books are written by one person alone, no matter the author. Everyone brings in some kind of publishing professional. But here's the rub. How do you keep your voice and your vision front and center while you're bringing in other professionals to help you make sure that book comes out as excellent as you want it to be? I'm Nell Edgar. I am the managing editor and CEO of Page Podium Press, and today I want to talk about holding on to your heart and soul even while you're inviting other publishing professionals into your sacred writing process. So today I've got a couple of tips for you, but I have one overarching thing that I want you to keep in mind as we move through this entire episode, and that is what is important to you as you begin your publishing journey. If you're ready to climb out of the Google rabbit hole and start writing your memoir in earnest, then I've got a free download for you. It's called the Memoir Method Checklist, and if you download it today, you're not only going to get all of the steps from developing to publishing to promoting your memoir, you're also going to get a free bonus video training that will walk you through the very same thought processes that we take at Page Podium Press to develop all of our authors' themes and messages and make sure they resonate with the audience they want to reach. Download it right now and let me know what you think. So I speak with a lot of authors, and anytime an author comes to me and they're concerned about their voice and their vision and making sure that that stays at the center of their book, the one thing I'm always going to ask is, what are your goals for that book? Because here's the thing, voice and vision, those sound like really solid words. I talk about them every single day. But when you really get down to it, when we think about voice and vision, those are such flexible concepts. And what I mean by that is that we can often have a voice and vision when we begin our project. And as we move through the project and as we just learn and grow, as all of us do in our daily lives, a lot of times something that seemed so solid and concrete can really drift away from us. And just like anything else in life, if you lose that concrete sense of what you were going after, you're probably not going to get it back, right? You're going to get muddled, you're going to get confused. It's going to be really difficult for you to guide yourself, let alone other people that you want to work with. So the number one thing that is going to make all of the other steps in this video make sense is you've got to define your goals. So everybody's goals are different. I think when I ask people their goals, a lot of times the first thing that comes to mind are, I want to be a bestseller, or I want to make a lot of money. And I'll actually tell you, a lot of the authors that I work with, they aren't as concerned about money, just because I tend to work with authors for whom the story is really the thing that is important to them. But it's fine if your goal is bestseller status, if your goal is to make a lot of money, that's a worthy goal. But do you see how if your goal is to make a lot of money, make bestseller status, you're going to have to orient your voice and vision much more toward the market, right? Toward the larger market and what they're going to want from you. If your goal is to get your story out, to make sure you help the people who need your story, the people, oftentimes it's kind of the younger version of ourselves. If that's your goal, all you've got to do is find those people and make sure they know about your book, right? Because if you make sure your story is helpful, people are going to want it. You've just got to find the people who need it. So once you're kind of thinking about your goal, make sure that you're thinking larger than just a revenue goal or a sales goal. What is your goal for what you want the book to do? So a few of the things that clients of ours have worked with as goals, I mentioned already revenue and sales. That is a perfectly reasonable goal. You might have the goal that you want to help people who are experiencing what you went through yourself as a younger person. I love that goal. That's most of our authors' goal. But that goal can go alongside your revenue and sales goals if you'd like. Sometimes the goal is that you want to do a career pivot. You want to use that book to establish your expertise and your authority, and you want to make sure that you're able to do things like get higher paying speaking gigs. You want to be on podcast interviews. You just want to generally have a little bit more visibility as a thought leader in your niche. I love that goal. That goal is so attainable if you do a good job with your book. So that is an excellent goal to have. You might also, if you have a small business, if you are somebody who does consulting, you might want your book to bring you leads. That is an excellent goal as well, right? Because we know people buy from people, not from companies. And the more you establish your personal story, the more inviting your service is going to seem. People are going to know you. You'll get on a call with people. They will already know who you are. It's magical. So that's another thing that your book can do. You might have other goals. That is excellent. Whatever your goal is, if you commit to it and go for it, you could probably achieve it, frankly, but you've got to have it front and center, right? So thinking about what your goal is going to provide a filter for you. As those collaborative publishing partners are coming into your world, you can sort out the advice you want to take from the advice that just really does not feel like it fits your voice and vision. And I'm going to talk about how that works as we go through this video and all of the different stages of your publishing journey. So the first and the simplest time when your voice and vision is going to be defined is during your writing process. Now, if you are writing your book yourself, you still can lose sight of your voice and vision, but most of the time that's not really a concern that people have. The issue is, and for first-time authors, this is huge. The issue is you're going to be learning and growing as you write that book. So whether you're writing with a coach, whether you're writing just completely on your own, also great. Whether you're writing and you've got a developmental editor or a book coach that's looking over your work and giving you feedback, or whether you and many of our authors work with full ghostwriters. I'm a ghostwriter myself. Where you're turning over your story to somebody else and you are trusting your baby with that other person. Here is where that goal is going to come in mind, right? So let's say you're working with an editor and they tell you, the way that you are structuring this story it's experimental. You're kind of going, maybe you've got some kind of recipes and then you've got the story in there. Maybe you've got some poetry, kind of a collage. Now that has worked extremely well. There are a lot of authors recently who have done this collage style memoir. They're really, really cool to read, right? But maybe your editor is telling you, I think that trend is probably on the way out. Or I don't think your story, the people that you're trying to reach are going to really like this collage style. If your goal was sales, it might make sense to listen, right? That is a person, I assume, that is a person who is around book sales. They are in the book industry. They have a really clear sense of what kinds of things are working and what kinds of things aren't working. If your goal is sales, I'd probably listen. Now, if on the other end of the spectrum, your goal is to express yourself and get your perspective out there because you haven't seen it before, and it's really important to you that you try out this structure, then that advice probably doesn't matter, right? If what you are interested in is expressing yourself, then you need to express yourself. But do you see how that goal, having that very clearly defined goal, becomes like a filter? So everything else falls away and you have just got those nuggets of helpful information. So when you're during the writing process, keep that goal in mind. When you turn over that manuscript to your agent or your editor, here is where things really start to get hairy for a lot of people. And while agents do often work with their authors to shape things up and make them as ready as possible to what's called go on sub, in other words, submit to editors at presses, the real sticker comes when you have that editor at that press who is getting your book over the finish line. And you'll probably, by the way, work with a few different types of editors. I'm just going to talk about your press editor here. At a smaller press, it's probably one person. At a larger press, multiple people are gonna have their fingers in your story. So when you're working with your editor, it's so important to keep that defined goal, because your editor has one goal. Your editor's goal is to sell books, right? What has happened when an editor brings your book on is that they are going to their entire editorial board, they're going to their marketing department, and they are asserting that they believe this book will sell. Presses do not acquire books that they don't believe are going to sell, but often they're going to want to make a little tweak here or there, or a big tweak here or there, to make sure that your book is going to fit the market the best way they can. That means revisions. So you might get anything from, I need you to add another chapter because there's this piece that seems to be missing. And oh my gosh, I've had that as an author, and there's nothing more heartbreaking than thinking you're done and being asked to submit another 12 or 15,000 words. It might be good advice. It's gonna hurt your heart a little bit. That editor might ask you to, on the other hand, cut a chapter or cut a section of a chapter. The editor might ask you to rethink some of the imagery or the symbolism that you're using. I've experienced that as well. At this point, you're gonna have to, again, revisit your goals, but things are more complicated now, right? Because if you've got the sales goal, again, if your goal is sales, trust your editor. I promise they have a better sense than you do of what the book market in general is looking for. But what if your goal was to make sure that your story reaches the people that you want to help? How do you think about it then? Well, there's a couple things to think through. One, do you know that audience really, really well? So I'll use myself as an example. I speak to hundreds of authors a year. I have a really clear sense of what authors of memoir, personal stories, and advice, what that type of author wants. I know that really well. A lot of other editors do too. But I don't know as well if we're thinking kind of what is the audience for recipe books. We don't do that at Page Podium. So I have really no sense of what a readership for cookbooks might be. You need to think about, do you know that audience? Do you know the segment of that audience that purchases books? Or is it possible, are you working with a specialized press, for example? Is it possible that your editor actually knows better than you what that audience is looking for? Because if your goal is to make sure you reach that audience, you need to make sure that the advice you're getting is for that audience and not a general readership or not some different segment that you're not as interested in. It might not be good advice in your case, but if you don't have your finger on the pulse of your goal, it's going to be really hard to filter that out. Now, one of the questions that I get a lot of times when I talk with authors is, can I say no to a suggestion that my editor has made? And the answer is yes, with a caveat. So most book contracts are going to have a clause at some point that essentially just says this contract is contingent on the author executing the manuscript to the level that they agreed to. Some variation of that. What that clause means is that at any point in the publication process, your editor could say, I thought this book was going to sell, but if you're not willing to make these edits, I don't think it is anymore. And at that point, they can cancel the contract. You have essentially not agreed to do something that they assumed that you had agreed to in the contract, which is bringing that book up to the notch that it needs to be for their particular goals. So you need to proceed with caution, right? My advice, if you get feedback from your editor that you disagree with, is you should make the most cogent, thorough, thoughtful, perhaps researched argument for why that edit is not the right edit. And then you should suggest an alternative edit. So often when something flags an editor's attention, what has happened is that something caught their eye and pulled them out of the text. You don't want that for your editor, and you don't want that for your readers either, right? If something is tripping up the reader, you need to adjust that. Now, your editor might suggest that you make an adjustment one way. You can come back and say, I see what you're looking at here. I want to do it a different way. Very likely, they're going to be willing to let you try that out. But what you should not do is simply just say no. When you say no, you're essentially communicating that you are not somebody that is going to be easy to work with, that you are holding your manuscript so precious that you're not willing to make adjustments to make it better. So always, when you get these suggestions, first, think about what your goal was. What did you define as your goal when we first started talking? That is your filter for whether that revision makes sense. If yes, make the revision. If no, you need to, rather than just say no, think about what can you do to make your no feel a little bit more like a no but or a yes and. How are you going to further the conversation and show your good faith in working with your editor? That's what you need to do at that point. Okay, so now we come to the thing that is the sticking point for so many authors. I have worked with authors as a coach who ended up turning down a book deal because they did not feel like they were going to have as much control as they wanted over these two things. And I bet if you're watching, I bet you know what I'm about to talk about. Your title and your cover. I get it. The title and the cover of your first book, all your books, is so important. It's so meaningful and it's so special. Trust me that I know this really well. My first book, The Struggle Over Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, we originally wanted to call that book Resistant. And the reason was that we were thinking about resisting in terms of Black Lives Matter, resisting oppressive structures, and we were thinking of the All Lives Matter folks who are resisting that resistance. Press did not like it. And I'll tell you, it wasn't that they didn't think it was clever, although I question a little bit whether it was at this point. The press knew that we needed to have that phrase, Black Lives Matter, the phrase that people would be searching for if they wanted to read our book, that needed to be in the primary title, the first part of the title. Now, we had it in the secondary title, Resistant, something, Black Lives Matter, right? I don't even remember what it was. They wanted it in the primary title because for search engines, and particularly they wanted to focus on libraries and bookstores, for search engines in the industry, that primary title, that's what's going to jump out and grab people. They didn't ask. They told us the title must have Black Lives Matter in the primary location. Now from there, they let us kind of play around with different variations and how we wanted to title it. But that was a non-negotiable. If we wanted to publish with that press, we had to change our title the way that they were asking us to. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. I know, and I was really disappointed by that. When we got that news, I was really disappointed. I really wanted the book out, though. And this is one thing that I think when you're starting to write, it's really, really hard to put yourself in the headspace you're going to be in down the line, months, even years, when you get to the point where your title is being finalized and registered in Bowker or when your ISBN is being registered. I promise, when you get to the point that that book is coming out and where you're going to see that cover, you're going to hold that book in your hand, I promise it is not going to be as important to you as it feels when you're getting started. I promise it's not. But because I know that's something that makes people really nervous, I want to say again, think about the goals, right? Our goal with that book was that we wanted to get the voices of people who had so generously shared with us for that book. We wanted to get those voices out to the people that we knew they could inspire. We wanted to get the story and the ideas in that book out to activists and social movement leaders, we really believed in that book. We didn't have a sales or revenue goal. That is honestly never my goal for my personal books. But it's not so different when you're thinking about how do we get this book into people's hands who need it. And I wanted that book in libraries. I am a firm believer that libraries they were my entrance into the world of books. They are the entrance of so many people into higher level thinking and considering new ideas. I wanted that book in the library. When our press told us librarians are going to search and they're going to look at that primary title, and we need to have the name of this movement in that primary title, I was sold. That's all I needed to hear. It was much, much more important to me that libraries acquired our book than it was that I had control over the title. It's just how it is. Different people are going to feel differently about that, but I promise you, if you think about your goal, it's going to make things so much clearer. I wanted to share another story of an author that I know who successfully argued with the press about her book cover, and she was able to get a new cover designed. Now, editors around the world, I'm so sorry for this story, because truly, authors, you should not argue with your editors in most cases. In this case, this author, Rebecca Dingo, she was writing about women in underdeveloped countries, and her whole purpose was to humanize these women and make people in the Western world really stop and think about that they're women, they're living their lives, they have the same kinds of priorities and the same kinds of needs and wants that we have, with additional factors that add complexity, but they still have good lives, right? They're still human beings, and we still can relate to them as people. When her cover came back, I'm sure you've seen images like this. When her cover came back from the press, it was a woman's body, but it was cropped so that you couldn't see her face. And then the title was, of course, kind of across her chest. She got that cover and she really freaked out. When she saw that, what she saw was exactly the type of imaging that she was arguing against. When you crop someone's face out of a picture, are you not making them just one of millions of people, just somebody that we aren't going to think of as a human, somebody we aren't going to think of as an individual? She could not have that cover on the book and still have the book mean the same thing. So, just like I said, when your press requests revisions from you, she thought about why it didn't work. She gave it a second to kind of gather some evidence, gather the best arguments, and then she reached out to her editor, the production editor who had sent her the cover, and said, there are real problems with this, and here's what they are. Now, if her goal was simply a sales goal, there's some possibility. The cover, I saw the cover draft. It was great, except for that ideological meaning that comes behind it, for that meaning of how are we framing these women. Her goal was to make change in the way we talk about these women. She could not let that cover stand. This is what I'm talking about when I say your goals are your filter. So think about what your goal is and make sure you argue from that place. So we've talked today about setting your goal, why that matters as you're writing, as you're editing, as you're working with your press, and yes, even as you are accepting or pushing back on your title and your cover with your press. As you are going through your book, a lot of things can come and go, things can kind of change. Your perspective might even change. But as long as you have that goal in place, as long as you hold it close to your heart, you are going to have all of the guidance that you need for making sure your collaboration comes out with your voice and vision, but elevated. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. We have other great videos, a whole series in the month of August on publishing. So make sure that you follow along so that you don't miss a thing. Thanks so much and happy writing. If it feels like your memoir is on hold because you're too busy diving down the Google rabbit hole looking for all of the answers to writing and publishing questions, then I have a download that is just for you. This free download is called the Memoir Method Checklist, and it's going to walk you through all the stages of getting your memoir out into the public, all the way from developing and outlining, all the way to publishing and promoting. This is every single step that my team and I at Page Podium Press use to get our clients' memoirs out in the world. And if you download it today, you're also going to get a free bonus video training that dives deep into all the things you need to do to get your memoir's theme, messages, and intervention very, very clear before you even outline your book. You are not going to want to miss these free resources. I know if you follow this checklist, you are going to end up with a memoir that you are so proud to publish. I can't wait to read it.